Everyone to this year's celebration of cooperative innovation and today's Cooperative Development Toolkit webinar. My name is Councillor Paul Cassidy and I'm Vice Convener for Environment Generation in Kirklees Council, but today chairing this panel, my role is Vice Chair of the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network. Today we'll be directed by a very knowledgeable panel rooted in tangible cooperative development, and combined with a vibrant audience, this session has the opportunity to leave us feeling inspired, informed, on the practicalities of using cooperative ideas and approaches at a local level. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to take this opportunity to celebrate the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network. As a cross-party special interest group of local government association, we're proud that both councillors and officers are engaged in our network. The CCIN is a collaboration between local authorities who are committed to finding better ways of working for and with local people for the benefit of their local community. We provide a national voice for cooperative councils informed by real experience and practice, with the aim of drawing on, emphasising and framing national policy and political debates about the future of public services, local democracy and communities across the country. The network is open to all UK councils regardless of political affiliation who can demonstrate innovation and a willingness to drive forward the Cooperative Council agenda. We currently have 118 members, of which 45 are full council members who represent 12 million citizens and have a combined budget of over £20 billion. We also welcome associate members from town, parish and community councils and opposition groups. We have a growing group of affiliate members who are values-based non-governmental organisations who wish to show their support and engage in developing innovative cooperative councils. And our supporters are 21 individuals and organisations wishing to show their support to the CCIN. As part of our dialogue with our members, council leaders have identified two key themes focused on community wealth building and cooperative placemaking. These two lists you see on your screen are not exhaustive, but are more of a framework to aid delivery and inspire. Our network works because our members put just as much in as they take out, and one example list can be found among over 600 examples of best practice case studies published in a searchable online format accompanied by our annual booklet. The CCIN members are encouraged to suggest projects where they can work with other members to find cooperative policy solutions to challenges facing local government. This slide shows a selection of documented solutions and toolkits available to our members via our website. The work is divided into large collaborative projects called policy labs, where members work together, and smaller projects called policy prototypes, where members may wish to try something in a locality on behalf of the network. The Council's Cooperative Development Toolkit is a successful example of this and one of the most visited pages on our website. But without stealing from Jonathan from Kirklees' thunder, let me take this opportunity to introduce today's panel. Today I'm joined by Jonathan Nunn, Policy and Partnerships Lead at Kirklees Council, and Project Lead and Contributor to the various CCIN publications, projects, including our Cooperative Development Toolkit. Graham Hart and Roisin, Neal, who are based in the Economic Development team at the Royal Borough of Greenwich Council, a borough which launched their Cooperative Commission in 2024 with one of the key strands of delivery focusing on supporting new and existing cooperative startups and businesses. And our final panelist is David Randall. David is a board member of Crystalisr, a member-governed organisation dedicated to promoting local action and collaboration. David is also co-founder of Maple Works, a space for co-working and productivity in the Maple Road suburban. Most recently, David has joined the Values and Principles Board of the CCIN. So that is our panel for today. And to start us off with, I will hand us over to Jonathan Nunn. Jonathan.
Morning.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So in my slot here, I'm going to run you through the background to the toolkit, how we went about developing it, talk through how we went about filling the resources, resource gaps that we identified, and a run through the toolkit itself. So the background to the toolkit is we've been members of the CCIN since 2019 and working significantly across the inclusive economy agenda, including around co-op and social enterprise promotion. Power to Change approached the network because they wanted to jointly fund a policy lab that really looked to serve local authorities in the co-op development space. So the policy lab was put together and we led it from Kirklees with participation from Greenwich, Oldham, Oxford, South Ribble, Stevenage and Sunderland. We also had support from Co-op Futures, who are an affiliate member, as well as CMS and Innovation Co-op, all of which I think are affiliate members, and also input from Co-ops UK as well as Power to Change, and we launched the toolkit back in October 2024. So we put together a steering group to support the work. We had a participatory workshop at the CCIN conference in 2022, which really sought to find resources and case studies that members thought that we should be looking at to learn from. We commissioned Co-op Futures to support the work, and they did a lot of desk-based research and surveys of councils and co-op development consultants for us. And we then supported that through local workshops and got on with writing the toolkit. So one of the key things that we discovered early on was that for local authorities, we needed to get from, we need more co-ops, which we often hear from our councillors as officers, to, well, what co-ops do you want and why do we want them? So we set about developing a set of case studies that would kind of crack that open, and we also looked at strengthening the evidence base for co-ops in the UK context. So the toolkit has these 4 parts. Back to basics. So what are co-ops? What are their benefits? What's the evidence for them? And what's the national support context for them? What can I do? So as a local authority, what can you actually do? What are the main areas where you can work to support co-op development in your area? Section 3 is doing your homework, understanding your local context. What co-ops have you already got? What are the objectives in your local area for the local authority, for your partners, and how might co-ops actually align with those? And finally, taking action. So getting practical, identifying your stakeholders, developing a theory of change, finding funding, and putting together an action plan. So the back to basics section, as I've said, really goes through what is a co-op, why co-ops, what's the evidence for co-ops and those national support organisations. The case study pack is a really key part of that. So the case studies that are in there cover all of these co-ops. So all 18 of those, you can download it as a PDF or a PowerPoint, and you can, if you use the PowerPoint version, pick whichever you want to include in your own presentations internally, or take different elements from them so that you can have a conversation about the whole range of co-ops that there are out there and different models, or if there are particular co-ops that you want to look at because you think they're relevant to particular issues that you want to address, then you can do that too. I won't go through these slides in detail, but just to give you an overview of what these case studies look like. Each case study has 3 slides to it. One's this overview, so you'll find things about where are they, this very brief overview on the right hand side of what the co-op is, how it came to be. On the left hand side, you've got stats about the kind of co-op structure it is, the number of members, number of employees and volunteers, and facts about the turnover. Then the second one has these key milestones, background and key features, which will help you understand the evolution of the co-op, how the structure works in terms of and things around the operations, its membership, decision making. You'll notice in the pack that actually the number of colours that are there in the key features varies equally. The key milestones, the number of elements varies quite considerably. Owen Powell, who put these together, really worked hard to make it a very flexible structure so that you can get in as much as possible, but make it work for any co-op. The final slide in them has these challenges in the top left, relationships that are really key, then the support that they've required to get going, and on the right-hand side, their views on growth and replication. So some co-ops would say, well, actually, there makes no sense being another one of us, but you can grow this out. Others would say, well, actually, we're really focused on our local area, but we're really happy to support other organisations in getting going to do the same thing in a similar way. And then they each have these key messages. And again, some are messages to local authorities, some would be to community groups, some would be to national government. The second big gap that we looked to address was the evidence for co-ops. I found regularly that making the case for investing in co-op development was really challenging. Finding numbers in the UK context that would allow you to say, well, if we put X thousand or million into co-op development, then we would expect to see X, Y, and Z. The evidence is really hard to come by, though you can come by stats on other things such as longevity of co-ops being better than standard business models. So we commissioned Catherine Brentnall from Manchester Metropolitan University, and she did a rapid evidence review, worked on top of a piece of work that the What Works Centre for Local Growth had done on plural ownership, and really challenged some of the findings from that using a realist model, which says essentially not just what's the average benefit of something, but who does this work for, who does it not work for, what the context, and there's some great insights in there. So moving on to what can you do, these are the areas that we identified that you can really work across. So increasing awareness and understanding, creating a supportive policy environment, business support, access to finance, and finally, direct commissioning and externalization. And you may want to put a whole dedicated support program around that that combines those elements. I would, obviously slightly biased, say that Business for Good West Yorkshire, which is actually led by TSL Kirklees, is a fantastic example of this. And you can find some great detail on what that looks like in the case study that we put together and is available on the CCIN website. I'll drop the link into that once I've finished presenting. So in terms of policy areas to consider, you can look at procurement, grant making, business support, business rates relief, and assets. And we've got examples in the toolkit of where each of those has been done, and importantly, resources that allow you to get going with that really quickly. So as an example, you'll find links to material on asset transfer and policies and strategies around that. So then doing your homework. As I said at the beginning, this is really about understanding your local context. What have you already got going on in your area in terms of co-ops? You'll often find that there are particular individuals that are driving a lot of co-op development if it's happening already in your area. What are the objectives that you and your partners have? And you might want to commission a study to do that. You might even go as far as having a co-op commission, which Greenwich will talk to you about in a bit. So in terms of current co-ops, the way to do this is starting with the Co-ops UK open data. So I went through an exercise doing this last year when we presented at the CCIN conference in Greenwich. And at that time, I was able to see from the Co-ops UK open data that they had 25 co-ops, 7 of those were social clubs, and pick out some really good examples of co-ops in their local area. So I will try and find the link to that, because that QR code is only going to help you very rapidly. So then how do you go about identifying your priority objectives? So I would look at all your key strategies. So any high-level local partnership strategy, your economic strategy, local growth plan, etc. If you've got a community wealth building strategy, then look at things surrounding that, like your JSNA, health and wellbeing plan, etc., etc. Again, I did that as an exercise for Greenwich, pulled out what were at that point, what looked like the key documents, and was able to take one of those from their essentially their council plan, and identify where there might be opportunities for co-ops and how those might map on. I won't talk through those in detail, but you can see how this is actually a really simple exercise. Once you've got a bit of an understanding from those case studies of the kind of co-ops that you could see, how those might relate onto things that you want to achieve for your local place. Then another thing that I would do is look at the makeup of your local economy. So again, these are just publicly available stats from ONS on your GVA by industry. And so again, just looking at those, working through, well, okay, we've got a big sector in real estate, what might that look like, and work through those. Another area to look at is market failures. This is, of course, where co-op started with the Rochdale Pioneers, essentially around a market failure in access to affordable, good quality food. And we can see the same today across food, housing, childcare, access to community spaces, exploitative employment practices, etc., etc. All of those can be taken as opportunities for cooperative development, and work out what your strategy would be to see more co-ops in that space. So moving on to the final section, taking action. We need to know who our stakeholders are. Co-op development doesn't happen simply by the local authority making loads of co-ops start up. You need to get people involved, work with partner organisations, but also who already is in the co-op development space or social enterprise space that might be looking to do this kind of thing or be interested in it. Work out your areas of action with your stakeholders, develop that theory of change, find finance. Some of that will be from things like local growth fund. Some of it will be finding third sector funding and things like that. And finally, measure impact, not just about how many co-ops did we start, how many jobs did we create, but also the social impact that ultimately was the reason we started this in the first place. So who are my stakeholders? It's the same kind of approach I'd take on most exercises. Start with your council cabinet portfolios. Are there people? This is Greenwich's list that was relevant at the time last year. I don't know how up to date it now is, but that allowed me just to spot, actually, here are some opportunities for cooperative development and the relevant stakeholder portfolio holders, then local MPs and people in the both the anchor organisation space and then key cooperatives. In terms of putting that action plan and theory of change together, there's a similar template to this in the toolkit. And so we can map out those areas and the interventions, outputs and outcomes that you want to see in each of those spaces. And also, importantly, the assumptions that you're making about if I do this, then I'll see this happen. Whenever we go through that process, there's always assumptions underpinning that. Hopefully, that has been a really good run through the toolkit, and I look forward to any questions later.
Thanks, Jonathan, for that really interesting, insightful presentation. We will now go next to Graham Hart and Roisin Neal, who, as I said earlier on, are based in the Economic Development Team at the Royal Borough of Greenwich. So over to you, Graham and Roisin.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm Roisin Neal, and I'm going to be speaking about Greenwich's cooperative journey alongside my manager, Graham Hart. We'll be looking at the progress that Greenwich have been making. So Royal Greenwich has a long history of cooperative development, dating back to the 1700s, with the first cooperative corn mill being in Woolwich, which then led to the development of the Royal Arsenal Cooperative Society. This extended over time and includes the establishment of Greenwich Cooperative Development Agency in 1984, which is one of the few remaining cooperative development agencies in the country and is an anchor partner of us at the Royal Borough of Greenwich. They continue to work across the borough as well as in neighbouring boroughs. They've recently launched a community pub in Lewisham, and they also deliver some adult learning for us. Our political structure as well has a really strong Labour and cooperative hold, representing the majority of our members, and some of them are actually on this call. So over time, our cooperative journey ebbed and flowed, but in recent times it's been revitalised, particularly since becoming a member of the CCIN in 2016. Our corporate plan and further economic development strategies have supported our desire to really cement ourselves as a cooperative council, which has then led to when we decided to launch our own cooperative commission. So we first kicked off our commission in March 2024. It was chaired by Lord Bassam of Brighton. The commission had 3 core strands: supporting new and existing cooperative startups and businesses, social care and community energy. The commissioners comprised of a group of experts from different sectors, representing the specialist sectors. And over the year, we held over 10 expert witness sessions, synthesised over 63 calls for evidence submissions, and we really had the strongest foot forward in developing our recommendations. The final report was launched at the CCIN conference last year, which was hosted in the borough. It was a great few days. So we developed 12 recommendations in the end for our commission report. In our business strand, this included working with local universities to work towards embedding cooperative modules in their curriculum, as well as piloting a cooperative hackathon with the University of Greenwich students. That took place at the end of November, and it was a really nice weekend. We got to see the students develop and learn about cooperatives, and it was focused on the social care sector and how we can encourage more social care cooperatives within the borough. We also had a recommendation around ensuring local businesses are able to access support to become cooperatives, as well as providing staff with training in cooperative values to use in their day-to-day work, such as commissioning and procurement. And this also includes a scheme that Graham's going to mention, which is we are developing cooperative champions at the moment. So that's been a really interesting few months. And finally, in this section, looking at the formation of a London-wide cooperative network to look into developing a community of practice at a regional level. For our social care recommendations, we have pledged to produce a cooperative care compact with the help of residents, workers and carers in order to outline how we can all work together based on cooperative values. Future commissioning will be reviewed to identify opportunities for adopting the cooperative models within our practice. And we've recently recruited a micro enterprise lead to encourage the growth of micro businesses in health and social care within the borough. She's undertaking some work with Community Catalyst at the moment to help work towards this recommendation, and she holds a quarterly micro enterprise steering group meeting for council officer input. Finally, to establish a local health and social care workforce board and a local care workers network to enable cooperation with institutions. Our community energy strand has resulted in a £1 million investment for us to launch a community energy fund, which was launched in December, And recently, the first round of applications closed and are being considered. That happened in the last 10 days or so. So it's a really exciting time to see what projects go forward. We're going to be ensuring as a council that we're ready to deliver the vision and objectives of Great British Energy and to create a community energy partnership board to encourage collaboration for those working towards a common community energy goal. We also have a governance recommendation to establish a cooperative commission board, ensuring there is appropriate oversight of the progress of our recommendations. And when I finish speaking, I'll pop a link to the full commission report in the chat. So if you want more information, you can take a look at that. I'm going to hand over to Graham now.
Thank you very much, Roisin, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this session today and the workshop. And it's fair to say that since the Commission recommendations and the launch of those recommendations at the conference last year, progress has been made, but there's so much to do. And I think the role of the toolkit is quite important in helping whichever stage of the journey you're at, helping you and assisting you along the way. It's a bit like, I mean, using the term toolkit is the essential part, something you can dip in and out of. You can take up and pick up the examples, the case studies, the structures, the methodologies, depending upon where you are in your area or as an organization, what the current challenges are. And one of the other things that's given us a bit of recent impetus is there's now a dedicated cabinet member and lead for this portfolio for the Cooperative Commission and implementing the recommendations. Councillor Avril Lacow, who's also deputy leader of the council, is taking it forward, and we're working with her and members of that board as it comes together to drive forward the wide and variety of recommendations that we have. Now I'm turning to the toolkit, which is a focus of this session, and considering how we're using and accessing the toolkit currently in the different parts of the work that it can support and inform. And I'm highlighting 3 current areas on the slide that you can see on the screen at the moment as to how we're utilizing it. And Roisin mentioned the hackathon as part of the work that's going on, and that's linked to our efforts to connect with the higher education and to both increase throughout their work and their curriculum and the good work they do in terms of their broad support for students and research. It's part of increasing the awareness and understanding of cooperatives and how they can feature not just in the sort of the business school elements of the university, but also in its wider different disciplines. And the hackathon has come about as part of the work with the university to tap into how they galvanize and work in a concentrated fashion, typically over a couple of days or a weekend, where they can tackle a particular challenge or an issue that's set for them. So we did this in November with the university and with some of their students across different disciplines. And also the challenge we posed for them there was in terms of increasing the amount of cooperatives featuring in the social care marketplace. So working with our colleagues in adult social care, we were able to set the scene and set the challenge for those teams of students to work creatively and collaboratively over the 2 days of the hackathon. And in terms of setting the scene, what's quite important is they could be walking through the doors without any prior association with cooperatives or without really an in-depth understanding of the social care marketplace. Obviously, either of those things will be helpful to them. But in this particular case, it's important for us to set the scene and give people a good grounding. And part of that is where the toolkit can come in. I think we will make more of the toolkit, I think, in future at the hackathon, and particularly the sections which are back to basics, because again, we want to make sure everybody's up to a certain level and a foundation level of understanding. So that section of the toolkit that features the introductions to a cooperatives, you know, what is a cooperative and all of those essential elements will be key as part of setting the scene to really give them a quick start in terms of tackling the challenge that they're set, because obviously they've only got a limited amount of time over the 2 days to really get creative and to get grips with the issues at hand. So that's one area in which the toolkit is being deployed, and we can do more on that too. We can develop that much further in terms of drilling down and supporting people around using the toolkit as part of that. Second big area is in the cooperative champions, which Roisin also talked about and mentioned the work we're doing in terms of internally with council officers. So The cooperative champions are really advocates, really influencers within the officer cohort of the council, and they can help really share and improve the understanding and increase the level of conversation and the expert conversation around cooperatives within the council and within the officer cohort. So the sections of the toolkit we're using there, yes, back to basics, but also what can I do? Starting to influence within the different disciplines, the different service areas, what people can bring to it, how they can actually bring it to life and use it in their business as usual, their day-to-day work. And the third area, and this is where colleagues in adult social care are quite interested, is in, as commissioners of services, how they can begin to use the toolkit and deploy it in their day-to-day activities. So what do they need to do to understand what's going on in their marketplace? So the section of the toolkit that's of real value to them is doing your homework and understanding the options and taking it forward. So these are areas, these three areas on this screen are an example of how we are deploying the toolkit and accessing it, and how we're encouraging others and widening the access to it. If we could move on, Roisin, because we just talk a little bit about the co-op champions and who what we expect of them. So we've launched the Co-op Champions initiative in the autumn, November time, and we wanted to get some awareness about what we're seeking to do here through these recommendations. And although Greenwich has a rich history in cooperatives, and the Royal Arsenal Cooperative Society became one of the largest in the country at its heyday, and that has helped tackle some of the challenges and issues facing our residents and communities over time. But now it's about refinding that purpose, reconnecting with the current challenges of today and where it can be solving problems. And so we've got a rich history. We've got some strong political leadership around this and understanding and ambitions. But what we need to do within the officer cohort is increase the awareness and understanding, particularly around where there might be opportunities to connect with the community and explore this in more detail. So the Champions program is very much that on an internal basis. What can we do to increase the awareness and understanding? What can we do to raise the level of conversation, and what can we do to turn it into practical action? So what we expect of a champion is to be that sort of influencer, to be that advocate, and join a community of practice that's trying to develop that knowledge and understanding within the council. So all of the things you see on the screen and the slide, the values, what we expect people to promote, and the cultural aspects, or all the kind of commitments we're seeking. And these are volunteers alongside their day-to-day responsibilities and their day jobs effectively. It's not an onerous commitment. What we're trying to do is encourage people through opportunities for learning and development, to find people of like mind, and also areas where the cooperative movement and the cooperative toolkit can be supportive of taking forward the priorities in each of the areas of work. So we've got a newly formed champion movement where we're recruiting more over time. We'll also be responding to their needs and areas of interest to refine the program of support that we'll develop as a result of that, and also to help promote it. We've recently just provided all the initial champions with email banners. So at the bottom of the emails, when it goes out, it will say, "I am a cooperative champion," and that might perk some interest across the organization too around this. Okay, and moving on to the next slide, please, Roisin. And this is all part of capacity building, essentially. So although there's a lot happened within Greenwich, there's a tremendous amount to do. And there's so much noise, and there's so many other challenges at play in the system and across the community. So what we need to do is ensure we're building a capacity at that early stage of awareness and understanding. And part of it, in terms of supporting increasing the number of cooperatives that might form in the borough and help meet the challenges and needs of our residents and community, is ensuring that when people come forward for business advice or enterprise support, that the cooperative element and the different alternative forms of business are in the conversation. So what we've also done to build capacity is ensure that the staff involved in those and the advisors who are doing that work, including the advisor working with micro enterprises that Roisin mentioned in adult social care earlier, they're all trained and aware of alternative business formats. So we've made sure people have had access to the training through Cllr to Action. And there's a session that's been run very recently for another 3 advisors on that, which we've been supporting as the council to enable that understanding is in the ecosystem around business advice and support. And it's interesting, obviously, Department of Business have got the call for evidence open at the moment that many people on the call may be thinking about and responding to, which is what are the business support needs of cooperatives and how are they different and where are the areas where additional assistance is needed for cooperatives and non-financial mutuals. So that's a very live issue, I think, in terms of how the system and the enterprise and business support ecosystem can support capacity building and advice. So we're just giving some insights into where we are on the journey, where the issues that we're seeking to address, how the toolkit itself is being accessed and used in that work. But what we'd like to do, and this is where we test this new platform that we're using for the first time, we'd like to ask a couple of questions and get some feedback, really. So thinking about your own situation, the council in which you're working, which capability would you like to most strengthen? Would you like to see develop and take forward? So you can use one of the reactions there: thumbs up, heart, clapping, smiley, light bulb, or you can put something in chat if you're struggling to find that, and let us know which of those 5 areas would you most like to strengthen within your council. So we'll just give a moment, see if we get folks finding the reactions and using the reactions. Getting some community assets bits coming up there, I can see. And then don't be afraid to put in the chat and use that too, in terms of the areas that you'd like to see addressed and developed. Excellent. I'm seeing lots of smiley faces, a few thumbs up too in terms of insight and engagement. And it's all relative to the stage of the journey we're on here, essentially. So that's useful to see what folks are feel. And alignment, I think what is crucial in this situation, particularly where the legal forms and the journey to cooperatives is quite complex and can be quite involved. The alignment, I think, between the leadership and the ambition and the capacity and resources, which are so overstretched in local government to be able to realize it, there needs to be that real focus on the priorities and the action together. So I think getting clarity is important. The second one we'd just like to have some thoughts and some feedback on then is what you think the biggest barrier is to cooperative practice in your area at the moment. Is it the issue of having that time and the resources to focus on it? Is it whether there's the real commitment and the mindset around it, or is it more practical aspects in terms of the level of structures and support at the moment? I'm seeing a bit about lack of structures there, and I'll just allow us a few seconds for other feedback coming through, more on lack of structures. And please also use the chat. I can't see it right now, but if we can capture some of the feedback and thoughts in the chat, and obviously we'll have a Q&A panel coming up later as well, which we'll be able to take part in. And I think all of these are things that are useful to reflect about and where the toolkit can be of support. So if you dip into the toolkit online and you go into the relevant section, it has a wealth of other useful links and information in there. For example, just yesterday, I was looking at and going down the legal formats information to explore that in much more detail and see what kind of suitable legal formats and options there are for cooperatives to take. And the toolkit helped me with that too. So I think it is an essential resource to dip in it to when you need to both help the structure and strategy aspects, but also the practical implementation. And we're going to continue to use it on our journey as we go forward. So I'm going to pause and hold it there and look forward for any kind of questions that are coming out of the session as we head towards the end. But I'm going to hand back to our organisers and for the next phase of today's workshop. But thank you very much for inviting us.
I should say, just before we move on to our next speaker, at the end we'll be taking questions. You can put your questions into the Q&A section, which is a wee bubble with a question mark you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So our next panelist is David Randall. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much indeed. It's an honour to be here, and it's very inspiring listening to everyone talk. Crystalisr is a cooperative society that's based in South London. When I say South London, I'm specifically talking about the sub-region. So with nodding at Greenwich and saying hi because you're in South London as well. But in the South London sub-region, we've got 5 boroughs: Croydon, Merton, Kingston, Sutton, and Richmond. And they work to collaborate to collaborate on community wealth building initiatives since 2021, which is really where the engagement proper started. And Crystalisr was born out of this collaboration. There was a need for engagement with small businesses. And
Hello.
I think we're encouraged to set up some
Okay, then.
online
Right, I'll tell
platform.
the tenant.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know who that is.
Bye.
Everyone, just
yeah.
to make sure you mute yourself while we have people speaking. Thanks.
Yes. So yeah, so the idea for Crystalisr came about through discussion within the higher education sector and chambers of commerce, and then we got support from the for the councils locally to have an online sort of community of practice, if you like, which helped with engagement with small business in the process of doing community wealth building. So what do we actually do? Well, there's a supplier readiness piece, which we've called Supplier Gymnasium. We're providing, if you like, good offices for the anchor institutions to talk about, what they're doing in terms of sort of bringing together partnership working, offering grant funding for enterprise, that kind of thing. And then there's also policy development, which takes place collaboratively. We've got an outstanding project manager, not in Crystalisr, but in the South London Partnership, called Paul Kirkbright, who's really managing this piece. But Crystalisr operates independently as a cooperative society limited, which is an umbrella organisation that provides good offices for all of that stuff. Thank you, Pete. If you could move on to the next slide. So I just want to, in conversation with Jonathan, I put together 2 cases really, which validate the corporate development toolkit, which I'll come to in a moment. But I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about the problems and opportunities that we have in South London. Again, I emphasize it's the South London sub-region only that I'm talking about. Next slide, please. So a lot of people might think, oh, South London, why do you even need to worry about cooperative development? Everybody's driving around in their 4x4s, the sun is always shining. I assure you this is not the case. You've got a very serious youth unemployment situation, which is getting worse week by week. It's peaked at over 20% in some areas. It's persistently over 14%, which is higher than the national average. You've got scenarios a little bit like the scenario in Preston, which launched the Preston model, where you've got hopes that were pinned on major investment from outsiders. In Croydon's case, it was Westfield. They were going to pump 1.3 billion into the economy, and they've been backing off and backing off and backing off. And now what it is really, the prospect of them building some elite housing, which nobody locally can afford. And there's a sense of hopelessness in Croydon that this is ever going to happen, the regeneration of Croydon town. Next slide, please, Pete.
Hello.
Good. Oh, yeah. So I think the
Yes.
opportunity really is around
Right.
taking.
If you,
Sorry.
which direction you come from?
Val, could you please mute? Thank you. Sorry.
Right. Now, if you go right out the car park, I know there's a roundabout. The house is actually on the roundabout, and about.
There you go. The South London Partnership partners have decided to set up an anchor network. Anyway, this is new. So whereas Greenwich has been doing cooperative development for decades, almost centuries, really, you could talk about. We're year zero was really 2021 as far as the South London Partnership is concerned. An anchor network is to be established. This is now policy in the growth ambition statement, which was launched last year. Amongst the sort of activities that kind of flesh out this collaboration are the London Cancer Hub, for example, and more, supply readiness and community wealth building strategies to buy local, etc. So that is happening. That's the policy context anyway. Next slide, please, Peter. So I'll come to our first example now, which is the big Integrate program. So I mentioned 2021 a couple of times. What happened, or why that is year zero, is that we were able to get some funding as a community from the City of London Business Rates Retention Strategic Investment Pot, which is a bit of a mouthful for what worked out to us to be £6.5 million worth of work for developing the collaboration within the South London sub-region. So the big Integrate program was a bit of a community wealth building work. How do you train SMEs to be more successful in local contracts? And Crystalisr's role in this was to work with the main contractor, which was London South Bank University, to turn the experience of being on the program, which is like a 6-session program, on supply readiness, to turn that into something more, something with longevity. So to use our community of practice to pull people in, the graduates, and to push them along on this journey. Next slide, please, Peter. And the outcome was actually surprising. And you would think that SMEs, they take the free stuff and they go and absorb it, and the partnership working might sort of collapse. That hasn't really happened. So there's a business called Ardeo, which is one of the graduates of the Integrate program, has set up a program called Care Concierge, which is an emerging platform cooperative, really, in the health and social care sector, which would help to make meaningful, if you like, integrated care at a neighbourhood level. How do you keep people in their homes so that they're not, reliant upon public services, and mobilising those small-scale SMEs within the community, to provide the social care services, be it, fixing a fence, to taking the dog for a walk, to, changing the washing machine, that kind of thing. And then there are 4 other projects which are now live projects. One in the green economy, which will, in terms of governance, will focus on an energy local club. And for those who know about energy local clubs, they are cooperatives, officially registered. There have been 18, I believe, so far in the country. There was one in London, in Brixton, and so we will be the second one in London. But this has been incubated, if you like, by the big Integrate program, and facilitated by Crystalisr. Hack the System is very interesting. This is about really young creatives and people who are sort of emerging talent in the creative sector. And we've got 14 universities and colleges in the South London Partnership, many of whom, or practically all of whom, teach sort of creative skills, be it graphic design, fashion, film studies, these sorts of things. And the work environment for these people, and this is something that has been addressed by the cooperative movement in the past, it's incredibly problematic. It's hard to get paid for the work that you do. So we're trying to, again, set up another platform cooperative, in collaboration with other partners, specifically for our local people to bring the audience and the creatives together on the same platform. Vision House, I'll just mention quickly, this is about cooperative housing. I don't know if colleagues have heard about it, but the Church of England decided last year that they were going to set aside, I think it was £3.2 million, to turn their property, or up to 200,000 acres of land, which is a lot, turn this property into affordable housing. And so that provides, in a very expensive area where we are, in South London, some opportunities for cooperative housing and setting up small housing co-ops. I haven't got time to go into South London ventures, but we'll do perhaps later if people are interested. And this is about commercializing ideas, using those 14 universities and colleges. Next slide, please, Pete. So reflecting back on the cooperative development toolkit, how does this experience validate what Jonathan and friends have achieved with the toolkit? I think you can see that the Big Integrate program, as a sort of, if you like, an initiative that was led from the center, has actually managed, because it was a dedicated program with funding, with a formal structure, was able to seed a tremendous amount of activity once people came together within this community of practice and were able to express themselves, and take risks. There's an element of doing your homework in the toolkit, and be able to bounce off that. I think the existence of a community of practice is a source of data. So we can build. It's a little bit like the the good growth. I can't remember that research that you referenced earlier on at the LSE. Anyway, doesn't matter. So you do need decent data sets, no question about it, from which to develop your local economic policy. And the access to funding piece, have dedicated funds available, at certain sort of points of insertion, if you like, in this growth process, just to help people along. It really is very important, and I can speak from experience, just to have just a little bit of money, to facilitate the engagement work, etc. On to the second example. I think I've only got a few minutes left. So this is a community energy, specifically the community energy project that I did reference in talking about the first example, one of the 5, but I wanted to sort of drill down a little bit into it. I noticed with interest how active Greenwich Council is in community energy. Things are a bit more topsy-turvy, shall we say, in the South London Partnership. We don't really see the same activism that you've got in Greenwich, and certainly not the same level of engagement. So Croydon Community Energy was set up last year, for example, through a crowdfunder. Didn't really have much engagement with the council about that. But the situation in Kingston, where I live, is a bit different. So the Sunray is an estate of 850 privately owned and tenanted properties. It's not social housing. So you're talking about the middle of the road sort of scenario, where it's not a public build. These are not public buildings, and they're not social housing. It's where, if you like, most people live. So because we had the impetus through the Integrate program to do partnership working, the idea came about through the people in the community of practice to do a pilot project, shall we say, using the good offices of Energy Local, which is a CIC that promotes energy local clubs, to do a community energy project in Kingston upon Thames, in the south of the borough in Tolworth. The role of the council here was critical, because they could see that the implementation, if you like, of their climate policy depended upon other people, if you like, coming in and helping out, because they didn't have the, if you like, the levers of power to do something for the middle ground. So a bit of seed funding, the £30,000, is helping us with providing energy advice, providing public engagement work, but also, really crucially, the council had software, very expensive software at their disposal, advanced infrastructures, sort of local energy planning software, which is a data set that gives you information on each and every single house in the borough, its capacity as far as solar panels is concerned, how much benefit you're going to get from it, where it is in terms of its energy performance, and that was very important contribution. Next slide, please, Pete. So just sort of finishing off by reflecting again back on the Cooperative Development Toolkit. What did we see here with the intervention of Kingston Council in the Sunray project? We saw the council exercising its convening power. They brought together the partners. They didn't have really the capacity to kind of to do much in this space because through lack of funding, but they were able to provide facilitation, introductions to small businesses one to the other through the green business community that they set up, that my friend Joanna, who works in Kingston Council, set up. And it sort of extended that convening into like a series of events. And this is very important for just building up the momentum, because you can bring people together in an event, but if you don't have successive events after that, they'll lose touch with each other. So a theory of change, and this appears in the toolkit as well, has emerged about how you deal with the climate emergency in terms of retrofit in this middle lump. And that theory of change is emerging around the idea of energy local clubs, because you've got these are resident-led initiatives. They are cooperative, and therefore they're transparent, and the governance is transparent and trusted. And you've also got a mechanism to raise capital to carry out the retrofit using community share issues, as they did in Croydon Community Energy. So that brings in a great deal of money potentially. So all of this, in my opinion, validates the work that everyone's done in the Cooperative Development Toolkit. And thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that really interesting presentation and the work that you and Crystalisr are doing. As I said earlier on, if you've got questions, you can drop them into the Q&A section, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, the wee question mark bubble, and you can enter your question there. So we've already got 2 questions in there. So the first one was a question for Jonathan. To what degree has the toolkit addressed barriers to existing new co-ops and SE developments? Jonathan.
Right, I think the best way to answer this is to separate out barriers that result from, well, I guess 3 kind of main domains. One is national government, and it doesn't aim to tackle those. There's some really good resources, such as the report from the Greater Manchester Co-op Commission, that look at some of those, and think tanks have done a huge amount of work on those barriers. It does look at some of the issues that may be found with local authority policies. So as an example, we've heard of grant making policies that don't allow beneficiaries of grants to receive grants directly. So if you had a cooperative for example, South Asian women, that actually, if you look at savings groups models, there's lots of examples of things around that. Those individuals could get together and could bid for funding, and they wouldn't be eligible under certain approaches to that policy. Whereas if you had a charity that was serving that group, they would be able to access that funding. And obviously, we want people to have agency and be empowered to address their own challenges where they've got the will to do so. So having a grant making policy that takes that approach and making that more open is beneficial to seeing co-op development. So it does look through that. Also, one of the other barriers is simply the lack of awareness, and that's not just for the general public who might want to start a co-op, but also within professional services. So if I went into an accountant's and said, I want a company structure, I could describe a co-op to the T, and the likelihood is they'd say, oh, well, here's a limited company off the shelf, that'll do what you need it to do, which obviously it wouldn't if what I wanted was a co-op. I just don't know the right names and labels for it. So there's a lot of resource in there about raising awareness across the whole breadth of potential stakeholders. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you for that answer, Jonathan. So the next question we have is from John Fahey. John asks, procurement guidance remains a challenge. How can this be addressed in the long term? And I'll go to our colleagues from Greenwich. Graham or Roisin, who would like to answer that one?
Yeah, I have a view. I'm not expert in procurement, but I did do the online Procurement Act 2023 studying and passed the tests a little while ago, so I've got some insight. And the challenge, I guess, here is a procurement law that exists for public authorities is agnostic on the grounds of the type of organisation. It's all about being fit for purpose, having a track record, being suitable for whatever you're specifying, and I'll come back to that, because it's what are we specifying in terms of the procurement, and it's working with colleagues that are in commissioning and procurement roles where I think it becomes interesting. But of course, it's also chicken and egg, because, for example, let's take social care as an example. You might be interested as an authority in trying to foster more social care kind of cooperatives or work in that field, but obviously to jump through the various hoops and be a risk worth taking, or a contract of the size that's maybe being put out as a social care cooperative, if you don't have a track record, if you're not regulated with the Quality Care Commission and the relevant sort of quality marks that you need to have, it makes it very challenging to break into that space and get something moving. So I think alongside the whole procurement question and people identifying what enablers there are in that process, I think it's also about how is capacity being built at a lower level, because much of, certainly in the local authority area, much of what we procure tends to be large and specialist and not particularly accessible to smaller organizations or smaller setups, and therefore I think there's a scope in the whole piece for piloting where can risks be taken in the system to kind of explore and give kind of community enterprise or cooperative formats a better chance, because it's you know, you can't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour or 0 to 70 miles an hour if we're staying within the law. You need to find the kind of stages towards that. And it is a complicated and challenging area, I think. And when time is pressure and resources are pressured, and people will be hauled over the coals if they take a risk and it doesn't pan out, I think all of these things push against innovation and push against taking that leap. So it's not an easy thing, and it's challenging, but there are enablers, I think, if people are studying it closely enough and identifying a route forward.
Okay, thanks for that answer, Graham. The next question we had, and this is for all our panelists, the government's currently running a consultation on enterprise support for the cooperative sector. What would each of the panelists like to see as a result from this fantastic opportunity? And I'll go first for an answer on that to David.
I think this is the perfect time for cooperative councils to to lead the conversation.
Yeah, I think it is. So I'll go next to Jonathan for your answer to that question.
It's going to sound like a really obvious answer, but my first point would be we need funding directly for this that can't be used for other things. There has been some funding for cooperatives and high streets, but the level of that's been incredibly low. It needs to be far more ambitious. Secondly, I'd love to see something around a British equivalent to Mark-Aura law, as they have in Italy. For those of you that haven't heard of that, what that means is that when a business is going into administration, the employees of that business are given the opportunity to buy that out, and funding is made available to allow them to buy the capital, and the business case for that is based on the costs of those employees becoming unemployed, the benefit payments, etc., that are required. It's just a fantastic example of how you can make this stuff work. I guess my third point would be seeing a balance to for cooperative models in succession that's comparable to what employee ownership trusts benefit from with the tax breaks that are available, though they were reduced in the last budget, but seeing something comparable to that for worker co-ops.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. Roisin, do you have anything you'd like to add to this question?
I was going to say, from what we've been looking at with Coolkit evidence, we've been speaking to local business support providers to bring together a response, and we think that business support specialised towards cooperatives would be really useful to come out of this. That comes with funding as well, like Jonathan said, but just providing people with the support that they know they can transition their businesses into cooperatives, they have clear pathways into starting up cooperatives, and they know how that it would work in the regional context of where they are as well. Yeah, that's me.
I mean, just to follow up a bit on what I was trying to say earlier, I think if councils are involved in in shaping the market for cooperatives, then they've got a chance of having success. Like as Wigan did with social care in Islington, they're trying to procure land so that artisan workshops can set up, that kind of thing. If that that convening and those that support is absent, and the market is as threatening as it is at the moment, it's very difficult for co-ops to survive. It is possible to shape the markets so they're a bit more user friendly, shall we say.
Thanks for those contributions, Roisin and David. And I will just ask a quick question for our colleagues in Greenwich. In terms of obviously your cooperative journey, you mentioned you set up a cooperative commission. So what would your advice be to local authorities looking to set up their own cooperative commission?
I'll say a little bit, but and then I'll defer to Roisin because she's been on the whole journey. Where I joined subsequent to the recommendations being announced, so I was not on the inside track of how the commission was shaped and how it delivered. But I think it's a useful thing to do, particularly if you've got external expertise. But you do need the very strong political ambition and leadership to actually pick it up and run with what it produces. It's not an insignificant amount of work to kick off, and if you're just going to result with some recommendations that are going to sit on the shelf and gather dust or be subject to the political cycle and disappear, then it may not be for the something to engage in and take on. But I'll stop there because Roisin had the benefit of being on the whole journey and now seeing it into fruition.
I started project managing the commission literally as I joined the council, so it's one of the first things I ever did as a graduate in the council. I think we had 3 really strong areas of focus. So I'd really recommend that, having areas that people within the council are passionate about and that politicians are passionate about, that really helps. And then we really found some great expert witnesses that gave us the best chance of coming up with recommendations that were implementable and would actually make a difference within the council. So I think finding your areas that you want to work towards, and also making sure that you do your research and you have the expert witnesses to make sure that the recommendations are viable for your council and your area.
I'm involved in Greenwich Cooperative Development Agency and Greenwich Bexley Credit Union. I've been around in the borough for a good number of years. How do residents themselves get more involved in this process? So I think this is a whole thing that's important. It's about how we reach out, how we help people become empowered and become involved. Credit and the cooperatives are an ideal way of doing this. I mean, I'm certainly prepared to do more work on it.
And we'd be happy to talk further to Mike. We haven't met directly, and it's interesting to say you're involved with GCDA, Greenwich Cooperative, and so on. So it'd be good to pick up afterwards. But yeah, I think there's an important point there, which is the council can't force cooperatives into being. I do hear what was said there about shaping the market, that you can try and assist in terms of some aspects. But I think the point that was just made in that question is you do need the conversation with the community, community groups, community editors, advocates, champions, because what I've seen in my short exposure to cooperatives is they often come about as a result of meeting a challenge, an underserved market, an unmet need, a market failure, and usually there are very passionate people involved who want to solve that issue. They don't come forward saying, I want to start a cooperative. They come forward saying, I've got an issue, whether it be in social care or in access to affordable food or whatever it might be. They want to address the issue. They don't want to set up a cooperative. The cooperative is the more community-minded solution to that issue. So I think the conversations in the community, whichever way they can be achieved, and neighborhood forums and various other things, community enterprise, wherever that conversation could be encouraged, would be a good thing. But I don't have a simple answer to that one. But I think that's where it needs to start and come from, because although the council can be an enabler and a facilitator, we can't say, right, we're going to have 50% more cooperatives next year, because we might set off on completely the wrong route in terms of where they should be, and we're not necessarily the advocates. Our members, our elected members, have a key role to play there, I believe.
We have been working on comms as well, post the commission, to try and make people aware that the credit union, for example, is there. We've been working with Alexis on a bit of a comms plan, raising awareness with staff as well. So we are trying to get the message out there a little bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, good.
Okay, thanks for that. So that's us came to the end of this session today. I would like to thank our panelists, Jonathan, Graham, Roisin and David for their contributions today and for taking the time to join us. It's been greatly appreciated. As you know, we have a number of other sessions running this week. This afternoon, we have a session on care experience at 2 p.m. On Wednesday at 10 a.m, we have a session on pride in place and regeneration boards. At 2 p.m. tomorrow, we also have a session on policy projects, our application process advice clinic. On Thursday, we have a session on community wealth building, every pound counts, at 10 a.m. And then on Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m, we have our annual conference. So I hope you'll be able to join us in some of those sessions. And thank you for your participation today.